The fragment is smaller than a hand. It rests on a rough wooden tray beneath glass, its surface the color of dry wheat, its edges darkened where the fibers have thinned. The letters are crowded into narrow lines. Gooeasy characters lean across the page in faded black ink. Nothing about it looks powerful. No gold, no carved stone, no royal seal. Just a damaged piece of parchment preserved in a room where the air is kept dry and the light is kept low. In the year 364, the Council of Laodicea issued a list of books considered suitable for public reading, and texts outside that accepted collection were pushed away from ordinary church use. The Book of Enoch was not included. The reason was simple. Its authority was disputed. Its descriptions of angels, judgment, forbidden knowledge, and ancient generations did not fit the boundaries being established. Centuries later, fragments of Enochic material appeared among the Dead Sea Scrolls near Qumran. The discovery changed the question. These were not late medieval copies invented by distant readers. Aramaic fragments showed that the work existed in Jewish circles long before the Christian era. And in Ethiopia, a complete Gooeasy tradition preserved passages that had disappeared from most surviving libraries. The central claim is direct. The Book of Enoch describes a protected line of human descent that passes through an ancient curse without receiving its full effect. In the next several minutes, you'll see what the text says about the bloodline, what the surviving fragments show about the curse, and why one small translation difference changes the identity of the people being described. If ancient texts that survived censorship and disappearance fascinate you, hit subscribe. Every week, we uncover what was removed from scripture, history, and the records that shaped both. But here's what makes this stranger. The evidence does not begin with a modern interpretation. It begins with manuscripts. One group of fragments from Cave 4 at Qumran contains portions of the Book of Enoch, including material associated with the astronomical and judgment traditions. Other fragments preserve the Book of Giants, a related Enochic work that describes the consequences of the Watcher's corruption of the human world. The manuscripts were copied in different hands and at different times. They were not one single document produced in one single generation. The Ethiopian tradition adds another layer. The Gooeasy manuscript families preserve a form of First Enoch divided into recognizable sections, including the Book of Watchers, the Astronomical Book, the Dream Visions, the Epistle of Enoch, and the final materials surrounding the birth and judgment traditions. The exact history of transmission is complicated, but the survival of the text itself is not in question. In 1883, scholar August Dillman published a major study and translation of the Ethiopic Enoch tradition. Earlier European scholars had already known of Ethiopian manuscripts, but Dillman helped establish the text as a serious subject of historical study. Later scholars compared the Ethiopic material with newly recovered fragments from the Judean desert. That comparison matters because the curse language is not standing alone. It sits inside a larger account of corrupted descent. And this is where it gets disturbing. What we're looking at breaks into 5 parts. First, the Watchers. In 1 Enoch 6 through 11, the text describes heavenly beings who descend to earth and take human women. Their union produces a violent generation. The text does not treat this as a private mistake. It connects the act to bloodshed, corruption, forbidden instruction, and a judgment that reaches beyond the individuals involved. Second, the corrupted inheritance. In 1 Enoch 7, the giants consume the resources of the earth and then turn against humanity. The violence spreads. The text describes a world where boundaries between heavenly beings and human beings have been broken. The important detail is that judgment is aimed at the corruption introduced into the human order, not simply at one family. Third, the flood judgment. In 1 Enoch 10, judgment is announced against the Watchers and their offspring. The language links the destruction of the violent generation to the coming flood. The earth is to be cleansed. The offending beings are restrained. Their influence is not permitted to continue openly. Fourth, Noah. This is where the bloodline question becomes specific. In 1 Enoch 10 and in the surrounding traditions, Noah is singled out as the human figure through whom preservation continues. The text places him inside a genealogy, but it also gives his birth unusual attention. His father, Lamech, is alarmed by Noah's appearance. The child looks different. The account becomes concerned with whether Noah belongs to the ordinary human order. Fifth, preservation. The Enochic material repeatedly separates what is condemned from what is preserved. The judgment is severe, but it is not total. Something survives the destruction. A line continues. That is the key to the claim. The text does not use the modern phrase, immune bloodline. It does not describe genetics in modern scientific terms. What it does describe is a human lineage preserved through a judgment directed against a corrupted generation. The distinction is important, because when later readers call that immunity, they can make the text sound more modern than it is. But the underlying pattern remains. A corruption enters the human world. A judgment is announced. One family is preserved. The line continues after the catastrophe. The modern parallel appears when researchers study how ancient populations survive enormous environmental and demographic shocks. In 2019, population geneticists working with data from ancient and modern genomes showed how bottlenecks can dramatically reduce genetic diversity while leaving particular lineages disproportionately represented in later populations. Institutions including the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History have used ancient DNA to reconstruct these population movements. That does not prove Enoch. It does something narrower. It shows that a population can pass through an extreme bottleneck and emerge with a genetic structure very different from the population that existed before it. A flood narrative and a genetic bottleneck are not the same thing. But the structural parallel is difficult to ignore. Catastrophe can erase most lines while preserving others. Here's what the translators left out. The detail is not a secret sentence deleted from every Bible. It is subtler than that. In the Ethiopic tradition, Noah's unusual appearance is described in a way that emphasizes the brightness and distinctiveness of the child. His father is frightened enough to seek an explanation. Some modern readers turn this into evidence that Noah carried a non-human inheritance. But the older language does not give us a laboratory test. It gives us a question of descent. And that question becomes sharper when the Aramaic fragments are placed beside the Ethiopic text. The phrase describing Noah as white or unusually bright has generated centuries of interpretation. Some readers have treated it as physical description. Others have understood it as a sign of divine favor. Still others have connected it to the Watcher's tradition. The translation problem matters because a reader who sees only white may assume a racial category that the ancient passage does not establish. The text is dealing with unusual appearance and suspected ancestry within a supernatural judgment narrative. That is very different from proving a modern racial bloodline. The suppression starts at the Council of Laodicea in the 4th century, when boundaries around accepted scripture were being formalized and texts outside the emerging canon were increasingly excluded from public church reading. The process did not happen in one afternoon. Different Christian communities maintained different collections for centuries. Then came the disappearance of the text from most Western manuscript traditions. By late antiquity, Enoch was still known to some Christian writers, including those who quoted or discussed Enochic material, but the complete work became difficult to obtain in Europe. Its survival was strongest in the Ethiopian Christian tradition, where Guizi manuscripts preserved the complete form. In the 17th century, European travelers began reporting Ethiopian Enoch manuscripts. In 1773, James Bruce returned to Europe with Ethiopic manuscripts of Enoch, helping bring the complete text back into Western scholarly attention. Then came translation. Dillman's 19th century work made the Ethiopic text available to a wider academic audience. R.H. Charles published an influential English translation in 1912. Later discoveries at Qumran provided older witnesses to sections of the tradition. The history is not a clean conspiracy. It is more complicated. Texts disappear because institutions reject them. They disappear because copying stops. They survive because another community continues to copy them. Sometimes the missing material is found centuries later in a cave. That is exactly what happened with Enochic fragments. Now here's where it gets active. In 2017, researchers studying the Dead Sea Scrolls continued to publish previously incomplete readings and refined earlier identifications using advanced imaging and multispectral techniques. Tiny traces of ink that were difficult to read under ordinary light could sometimes be distinguished by digital processing. The important point is not that a hidden bloodline was discovered. It is that manuscript evidence can change when the physical object is examined with better tools. A fragment can look blank and still contain information. A damaged line can change the reading of a sentence. A missing word can change the identity of a person. And once those small details are restored, older translations sometimes have to be reconsidered. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying that a surviving human family today can be scientifically identified as the direct, biologically pure descendants of Noah, or that such people are physically immune to a supernatural curse. But what the Enochic evidence describes, when you look at it carefully, matches a narrower and more defensible pattern, a preserved lineage passing through a judgment that destroys a corrupted generation. The text's concern is not modern genetics. It is continuity. Who survives? Who carries the line forward? Who remains after the judgment? Those questions appear repeatedly in ancient genealogical traditions. They are used to explain why one family continues when another does not. And Enoch adds an unusual layer because the threat is not described as ordinary political conflict. It begins with the Watchers, forbidden unions, corrupted instruction, violent offspring, and a judgment that reaches across generations. That is why the phrase 6,000 years needs to be handled carefully. The Book of Enoch does not provide a modern calendar date saying that a curse began exactly 6,000 years ago. The number belongs to the broader chronology often reconstructed from ancient genealogies and later traditions. Depending on the chronology used, the numbers shift. So the strongest version of the claim is not that Enoch gives us a hidden countdown clock. It does not. The stronger point is that the text places a corruption in the deep human past and describes its consequences as extending across generations. What we have to confront is the simplest explanation that fits the evidence. If the Enochic tradition describes a specific corrupted generation, and if the judgment is directed against that corruption, then preservation of a different line is central to the text. If the Qumran fragments show that Enochic traditions were circulating centuries before the rise of Christianity, then the idea of a preserved lineage cannot be dismissed as a medieval invention. If the Ethiopic manuscripts preserve details that disappeared from most Western transmission, then the Ethiopian tradition becomes essential for understanding what the complete text actually contains. And if the Noah passage connects unusual appearance, ancestry, judgment, and preservation, then the bloodline theme is not something modern viewers have invented from nothing. But there is one final distinction. Preservation is not the same as immunity. The text does not promise that Noah's descendants cannot suffer, die, or fall into corruption. It describes survival through judgment. It describes continuation. It describes a line that remains after destruction. That is enough to explain why the image of an immune bloodline has remained so powerful. The ancient text is not giving you a genetic test. It is giving you a genealogy under pressure. It is telling you that judgment can move through generations without erasing the line that has been chosen for preservation. And that is where the title of this investigation has to be understood. The bloodline is not immune because its members possess a biological shield against every curse. It is immune in the narrower sense that the judgment described in the text does not erase the preserved family. The distinction changes everything. It takes the claim away from modern fantasy and puts it back into the manuscript, back into the genealogy, back into the strange account of Noah's birth, back into the fragments recovered from the Judean desert, and back to the small piece of parchment with which we began. The fragment is still smaller than a hand. Its edges are still dark. The fibers are still visible where the material has worn thin. The letters still sit close together beneath the glass, carrying a tradition that passed through languages, communities, and centuries of disappearance. It does not announce a secret family living somewhere today. It does not prove a supernatural genetic immunity. It does something quieter. It preserves a record of an ancient belief that one line would remain when another was judged. It is still there, still holding the marks of the people who copied it, still carrying the account of a corrupted generation, a coming judgment, and a family preserved through it. Exactly the kind of record that survives when the people who first wrote it are gone. There is another reason the manuscript evidence matters. A text can survive in several forms without every form being identical. Scribes copied what they could read. Damaged pages were replaced. Names were transliterated into new alphabets. A single ancient term could move into another language and acquire a slightly different shape. Enoch is useful because its surviving witnesses are separated by geography and time. The Qumran fragments show that the tradition existed early. The Ethiopian manuscripts preserve a much larger form of the work. Neither witness answers every question, but together they establish continuity across centuries. That continuity matters for the bloodline passage. The concern with Noah's ancestry is not isolated. It appears within a chain of traditions in which the human world is divided between corruption and preservation. The Watchers cross a boundary. Their descendants become violent. Judgment follows. Noah remains. That sequence is the evidence. It is also why the name of Noah matters more than the word curse. The curse is not presented as an independent spell attached to a family tree. It is part of a judgment structure. The text describes wrongdoing, announces consequences, identifies those who will be punished, and then identifies those who will remain. This is closer to a legal record than a magical formula. There is an accusation. There is a sentence. There is a surviving household. And there is a future generation. A second modern parallel is population genetics. Ancient DNA research has shown that human populations repeatedly expand, contract, mix, and disappear. Particular paternal or maternal lines can survive, while surrounding populations change dramatically. Researchers at institutions including the Max Planck Society and Harvard have used ancient genomes to reconstruct these movements. The results do not validate Enoch's supernatural claims. They demonstrate something narrower. Ancestry can persist through severe demographic change. That gives us a useful boundary. We can discuss lineage preservation without pretending genetics has discovered Noah's family. Enoch does not use the language of DNA, chromosomes, or inherited immunity. Those are modern categories. Applying them directly to the ancient text would create a conclusion the manuscript never makes. But the underlying question remains clear. What happens to a family when the world around it is judged? Enoch's answer is preservation. The flood destroys the violent generation. Noah remains. His descendants continue. The human story does not restart from nothing. That is why the bloodline theme has endured. The text does not give a laboratory formula. It gives a genealogy that survives catastrophe. And once you see that, the word curse changes meaning. In the ancient world, a curse could describe a judgment, a sentence, or a declared consequence. It did not necessarily mean a supernatural substance moving through DNA. So when modern readers speak of a curse thousands of years old, the strongest historical reading is that an ancient judgment tradition is being traced across generations. That is still unusual. It is still worth investigating. And it can be investigated without adding claims that the manuscripts themselves do not contain. The evidence remains small, physical, and imperfect, but it is there. And that is enough to keep the question alive. The surviving pages cannot identify a family living today, but they can preserve the ancient claim that one line endured when another was condemned and destroyed.